My family said I didn't help enough and forced me to pay my brother's rent, but the hidden truth my grandma revealed exposed their cruel scheme. Maybe that's why when I started making good money, I didn't think twice about sharing it. I paid my parents' mortgage, helped my brother Lenny with his car payments, and even paid my grandmother's medical bills. Lenny's wife, Kelly, wasn't shy about asking for help either. At first, it was small things like groceries or school supplies for their kids. Eventually, it became bigger requests: rent, utility bills, even a vacation they couldn't afford. I told myself it was okay. I had it, and they needed it. But last Christmas Eve, things reached a breaking point. We were all at my parents' house. The table was set, the tree was lit, and the kids were running around. It should have been one of those warm, happy family moments, but the vibe was off. I noticed that right away. My parents were unusually quiet, Lenny kept avoiding my eyes, and Kelly had this smug little grin on her face, like she already knew how the night was going to go. After dinner, my mother cleared her throat. "Mike," she began, "we've been talking, and we think it's time you started doing a little more for the family." I blinked. More? What did she mean? She exchanged glances with my dad, who nodded silently. Then she said, "Lenny and Kelly are having trouble. They can't keep up with their rent, and it's causing problems between them. Kelly is very upset." Kelly chimed in, "Yeah, it's been really hard. I've told Lenny 100 times that he needs to work something out, but..." She shot him a look. "Well, here we are." My mom cut in before I could answer. "We think you should help pay the rent for a while. It's the least you can do after all we've done for you." I sat there, stunned. I wanted to remind her of the mortgage payments, the bills I'd covered, the vacations I'd paid for, but before I could, she dropped the bomb. "If you don't," she said, her tone cold and final, "then maybe you should just go have Christmas alone this year." My dad nodded again, as if that was perfectly reasonable. Kelly looked more smug than ever. Lenny just stared down at the table. I looked over at my grandmother. She was sitting quietly in the corner, sipping tea, her face unreadable. For a moment, I thought she was going to say something, but she didn't. It felt like everyone in the room was against me. So I gave in. I said I'd pay Lenny's rent, and just like that, the mood changed. My parents smiled, Kelly gushed about how grateful they were, and Lenny finally looked up from the table. I felt like I had just bought everyone's approval, and it left a bitter taste in my mouth. That night, as I was getting ready to leave, my grandmother grabbed my arm. "Mike, come to my house tomorrow. I have something to tell you," she said quietly. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would change everything. The day after Christmas, I went to my grandmother's house. She lived in a small, cozy bungalow that she and my grandfather had bought decades before. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, and it always felt like walking into a safe haven. She greeted me at the door, looking sharp as ever in her knit cardigan. "Come on in, Mike," she said, leading me into the kitchen. There was a fresh pot of coffee brewing and a plate of her famous oatmeal cookies on the table. We made small talk for a while about the kids, the coming blizzard, and the state of her garden, but I could tell she had something on her mind. Finally, she pushed the cookies aside and looked me straight in the eye. "Mike," she began, "we need to talk about what happened last night." I sighed. "What about it, Grandma?" I agreed to help. "Everybody's happy now, right?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shook her head slowly, as if disappointed but not surprised. "Do you think they're really happy, or are they just happy they got what they wanted?" That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "I mean, they're using you. And last night they didn't just use your kindness, they manipulated you. Told you to leave if you didn't help. That's not family, Mike, that's blackmail." I didn't know what to say. "You're a good man," she went on. "Too good, if you ask me. You've been helping them out of love, but they've started to expect it, like it's your responsibility instead of a choice you make. That's not right." I stared down at my coffee cup. "I just want to take care of everyone. Isn't that what family is supposed to do?" "There's nothing wrong with helping," she said, her voice firm. "But there is something wrong with being taken for granted. And last night, when they told you you'd have to celebrate Christmas alone if you didn't give in, that was cruel. You don't deserve that." Hearing her say it out loud was like a slap in the face. I'd been telling myself I was doing the right thing for so long that I hadn't stopped to think about how they were treating me. "They're adults, Mike," she continued. "If Lenny can't pay his rent, he needs to figure it out for himself. If Kelly has a problem with that, she needs to support him, not blame you. And as for your parents," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "they've gotten too comfortable leaning on you instead of standing on their own 2 feet." I took a long breath. So, what are you saying? I should stop helping altogether? She smiled gently. I'm saying you need to set limits. It's your life, your money. You've worked hard for it. Don't let guilt or pressure make you forget that. We sat in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. Then she reached across the table and patted my hand. You've done more than enough, Mike. Now it's their turn to step up. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. For the first time in years, I began to see things clearly. My family didn't need more of my money, they needed a wake-up call, and I was finally ready to give it to them. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. By the time I got home that night, I'd made up my mind. Things had to change. I wasn't going to let my family continue to use me, no matter how much guilt they tried to throw my way. I called my parents first. My mom picked up. Hey Mom, I need everyone to meet at your house tonight. You, Dad, Lenny, Kelly, everyone. There was a pause, then she asked, what is this about? Just trust me, I said. I'll explain when I get there. And Grandma is coming too. She hesitated but finally agreed. Next, I called my grandmother to let her know. She didn't ask many questions, she just said she'd be there. Somehow, that gave me the reassurance I needed. By 7 p.m., we were all crammed into my parents' living room. The Christmas decorations were still up, and the smell of pine hung in the air. My mom sat on the couch next to my dad, who looked confused but concerned. Lenny and Kelly were on the love seat, Kelly scrolling through her phone like she had somewhere better to be. My grandmother sat in the recliner, her expression calm but alert. I stood near the door, taking it all in. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake, but then I thought of all the times I'd bent over backwards for them, only to be told it wasn't enough. That memory gave me the push I needed. So, I began. I've been doing a lot of thinking since last night, and I need to get some things off my chest. My mother's eyebrows knit together. Mike, what's going on? Why are we all here? I held up a hand. Just let me finish. I turned to Lenny first. You and Kelly are having trouble with the rent, right? Lenny nodded slowly while Kelly crossed her arms. Well, I helped you out because I thought I was making things easier for you. But the truth is, I've been enabling you. You've both been relying on me instead of finding solutions for yourselves. That ends now. Kelly's head snapped up. Wait, what? I didn't let her interrupt. Lenny, you're my brother and I love you, but you're a grown man. If you need more money, get a second job. If that's not enough, downsize, move to a smaller place, do whatever you need to do, but stop expecting me to bail you out. The room fell silent. My mother opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. And you too, I said, turning to my parents. I helped you with everything from the mortgage to groceries to home repairs, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. But last night, when you told me that if I didn't help Lenny, I would have to celebrate Christmas alone, that wasn't just hurtful, it was manipulative. And I won't stand for it anymore. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat while my mom's face turned red. Finally, I turned back to Kelly. And you've been sitting back, letting Lenny and me carry all the weight while you do nothing but complain. If you care so much about your family's finances, maybe it's time you stepped up and contributed more. Her jaw dropped, but she didn't say anything. I took a deep breath and looked around the room. I've spent years putting your needs ahead of my own, but from now on, things will be different. I'm going to help when I can and when I want to, not because I feel guilty about it. You're all adults. It's time to start acting like it. For a long moment, no one spoke. My parents looked stunned, Lenny looked embarrassed, and Kelly just glared at me like I'd insulted her entire existence. The only person who didn't look shocked was my grandmother. She smiled at me, a small, knowing smile, and gave a single nod. After I finished speaking, the room fell silent. My family sat there, stunned, as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. I was about to wrap things up and leave when my grandmother, who had been sitting quietly the whole time, cleared her throat. Before we end this little meeting, she said, her voice calm but firm, there's something I need to say as well. I turned to look at her, confused. Grandmother? She looked around the room, her eyes landing on my parents, then Lenny and Kelly. You've all been using Mike for years, that much is obvious. But what you don't know, what none of you know, is that I've been keeping a little secret of my own. My mother frowned. What are you talking about? Grandma leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together. Mike, do you remember when your grandfather died? He left me a little something, not much, but enough to get by. Of course, I said, not understanding where this was going. Well, she continued, her voice dropping, About 5 years ago, your parents came to see me. They said they were having financial difficulties. They asked for a loan, said they'd pay it back as soon as they could. My mother's face turned pale. I didn't think much of it at the time, Grandma said, because I wanted to help. So I gave them the money. But they never paid me back, and as the years went by I noticed something. The more you help them, the less they seemed to care about paying me back. It's as if they thought your money was a free pass to ignore their debts. I stared at her, stunned. How much did they owe? Her eyes locked with my mom's. $30,000. I nearly choked. My mom stammered, It wasn't like that. We were going through a hard time, and we needed... Grandma held up a hand to stop her. Don't even try it, Linda. I've heard all the excuses. And now that I've seen how you've treated Mike, I realize that you never intended to repay me. You were just hoping I'd forget. The room fell silent. My dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch, while my mom kept opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water. Grandma, why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, still trying to process what I'd just heard. She gave me a sad smile. Because I didn't want to cause any trouble. But after what they pulled last night, I can't keep quiet anymore. They deserve to know the truth. I turned to my parents, my anger boiling over. So, let me get this straight. Not only have you been taking my money for years, but you owe Grandma 30 grand and you have the nerve to tell me that I'm not helping out enough. My mom tried to answer, but I wasn't having it. No, I said, cutting her off. I'm done. Done with the guilt, done with the manipulation, done with all of it. You can do this on your own. I looked at my grandmother, who gave me a small nod of agreement, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. The tension in the room was suffocating. My parents sat there, visibly panicked, while my brother and Kelly exchanged awkward glances. My grandmother remained calm, watching as if she'd been waiting for this moment. I turned to Lenny. Did you know about this? That Mom and Dad owed Grandma 30 grand? He shook his head quickly. No, man, I swear I didn't know. Kelly muttered under her breath. I'm not surprised. What was that? I snapped, narrowing my eyes at her. She looked up and shrugged, like she didn't care. I said it doesn't surprise me. Your parents have always been, shall we say, creative with their finances. How do you think we got into so much debt in the first place? Half of it is from loans we took out trying to keep up with their suggestions. Kelly, Lenny hissed, but it was too late. I turned back to my parents. What's she talking about? My mom looked cornered, but my dad, who had barely spoken all night, finally broke his silence. We may have encouraged Lenny to take out some loans for the family, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you kidding me? I said, my voice rising. It was supposed to be temporary, my mother interjected, suddenly defensive. We thought if Lenny could help out, it would be easier for everyone. And then you started earning more, so you thought I'd just take over. I finished for her, disgusted. My mother's silence was all the confirmation I needed. Out of the blue, my grandmother's voice broke the tense silence once more. There's more to this, Michael, she said, her tone heavy with unspoken weight. I turned to face her, a knot tightening in my chest. What do you mean, Grandma? I asked, my voice barely steady. She paused, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she reached into her worn leather purse. After a moment's hesitation, she produced a single, carefully folded piece of paper and extended it toward me. I wasn't sure whether to show you this, she began, her eyes searching mine. But after everything that's happened tonight, I think it's time you knew. I took the paper, my fingers brushing against its crisp edges. It was a bank statement, dated roughly a year ago. Her bank statement. At first, I couldn't make sense of why she'd handed it to me. My eyes scanned the numbers, and then I saw it, a string of withdrawals, each one larger than the last. $2,000 one month, $3,500 the next, and more, accumulating to tens of thousands over 6 months. The figures stared back at me, cold and undeniable. What is this? I managed to ask, my throat tightening as a wave of dread washed over me. Grandma's expression remained resolute, though her voice carried a quiet sorrow. That's my account, Michael. Your parents have been dipping into it. The words hit me like a physical blow, unraveling the fragile trust I'd clung to. How could they do that? I stammered, struggling to process the betrayal. Grandma sighed, her gaze steady but pained. After your grandfather passed, I was overwhelmed with all the paperwork, bills, accounts, everything. I gave your mother power of attorney to help manage things. I trusted her. I didn't realize she was siphoning money for herself. Her words were measured, but the hurt behind them was unmistakable. Before I could respond, my mother shot to her feet, her face flushed with indignation. "That's a lie!" she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room's growing tension. "I only took what we needed to get by." Grandma didn't waver, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to my mother's outburst. "What you needed, maybe," she replied evenly, "but I never gave you permission to touch a dime of that money." The room descended into chaos. My father placed a hand on my mother's arm, murmuring words meant to soothe, but they only seemed to fuel her anger. Across the table, my siblings, Lenny and Kelly, began whispering heatedly, their voices a low hum of accusations and defensiveness. I stood frozen, the bank statement clutched tightly in my hands, its numbers blurring as my vision swam. Each withdrawal listed was a fracture in the foundation of my family, a testament to secrets kept and trust broken. How had it come to this? The weight of the revelation pressed down on me, and I felt as though the very air in the room had thickened, making it hard to breathe. My parents' voices rose, overlapping with Lenny and Kelly's hushed argument, while Grandma sat quietly, her eyes fixed on me, as if willing me to understand the gravity of what she'd just revealed. The family I thought I knew was unraveling, thread by thread, right before my eyes. In an instant, the tumult in the room was pierced by my grandmother's voice, steady and commanding, slicing through the clamor like a blade. "Before any of you try to spin this or deny it," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the table, "I've already spoken to a lawyer." A sharp gasp escaped my mother's lips. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and defiance. Grandma's expression didn't falter, her eyes, sharp with resolve, locked onto mine. "I needed to ensure my affairs were in order, Michael," she said, her tone unwavering. "And I've made a decision. I'm appointing you as my power of attorney, effective immediately." The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of her words settling over us like a heavy fog. I stared at her, my pulse pounding in my ears as my thoughts spiraled. "Grandma, are you absolutely sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, grappling with the enormity of her trust. She nodded, her face a portrait of conviction. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," she replied, her words carrying a quiet strength that anchored the moment. I glanced around the table, taking in the scene. My parents sat frozen, their faces drained of color, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Lenny's brow was furrowed, his eyes darting between Grandma and me, still trying to piece together the implications. Kelly, meanwhile, had a calculating look, her fingers tapping lightly on the table as if already plotting her next move. The gravity of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about Grandma's trust in me, it was about stepping into a role I hadn't anticipated, navigating a family fractured by secrets and betrayal. The bank statement still burned in my memory, its numbers a stark reminder of the rift that had been exposed. Now, with this new responsibility, I realized the depth of the challenge ahead. I wasn't just protecting Grandma's interests. I was being called to confront the unraveling of our family, to stand firm in a storm I hadn't seen coming, and to find a way forward, not just for her but for myself. And as I stood there, holding that bank statement, I knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. After that night, everything changed. My grandmother and I did what we said we would. She made me her power of attorney, and her finances were sealed. My parents were told they couldn't touch her money anymore, no excuses. As for me, I stopped giving handouts altogether. No more rent for Lenny and Kelly, no more bills for my parents, no more emergency money. At first, they tried to test me. My mom called to ask for help with the electric bill, and Lenny called again about his rent, but I stood firm. Finally, the calls stopped. They got the message. I wasn't going to bail them out anymore. Our relationship isn't the same now. We still talk occasionally, but it's distant and awkward, especially because I know they're struggling financially. But I don't feel guilty anymore. They have to work things out for themselves. My grandmother and I, on the other hand, are closer than ever. She's doing well in her new home, and we see each other regularly. She says she's proud of me for holding my own, and honestly, I'm proud of myself. Now, with the money I've saved, I can focus on my own life, traveling, investing, and building the future I want. It feels good to live without the weight of constant demands on my shoulders. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is set boundaries with the people you care about, but sometimes it's the only way to truly take care of yourself.